Melissa Matinzi sat down with author and end-of-life doula Juliette Kerr to talk about what motivates her work.
So Juliette, thank you so much for joining us here on the local scene and on our set. Can you share a little bit about your background and what drew you to writing?
Well, yeah, I'd love to share. Thank you for having me. I grew up in Long Beach, California, and it's kind of the home of the Queen Mary.
Yep.
And I moved to another place that had an important ship in its harbor, the Mayflower, and here in Plymouth in 2008, but I came with my husband and 3 sons. I have always been a writer. I've enjoyed writing from a really early age. I'm the kind of person that would write you poems for a birthday gift or something like that. I'll give you a gift and I'll write you a poem. But it's just been kind of in my DNA. I went to school, studied English, kind of went off the beaten path, didn't do business or anything like that. And in 1996, I was in Scotland at the University of St. Andrews and got a master's in Shakespeare.
Wow.
Which was a fun experience, yeah. And so I came away with that with a master's degree and a boyfriend who would be my future husband. So it was a twofer.
That was worth it.
It was worth it. But then I've been a stay-at-home mom most of my life in my adult years. But during that time, I went to seminary at Gordon Conwell up north in Hamilton and got a second master's degree in spiritual formation. And that kind of led to me opening up a business, a companioning business called The Rose and Poppy. And it focuses on end-of-life doula care and spiritual direction.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and kind of just in the midst of that, I've been writing. So kind of in my spare time or free time, and when I had a minute, I would have my husband take the kids, and I would just, find a quiet place to write.
I was going to say, how hard was that to actually, for the process, what was that like to?
Well, it took me a really long time. I started 8 years ago writing this book, and I kind of forgot about it. I left it on my computer for years because I got too busy. And then I kind of came back to it 2 or 3 years ago, started to hone it, tie up loose ends, make the story a little tighter, and then went about trying to get it published. So
wow. So it took a while to get through the process.
It took a while,
really,
yeah.
So the book is called To Fill a Jar with Water. So you're saying about a 10-year process to work on that. When you went back to it, did you come at it with like a different viewpoint or like more experiences to craft it?
I did. There's a couple of scenes at the end where I had some editors look at it to kind of help me refine it and hone it. And she just said, I want more, and I was like, goodness gracious, I need to figure out something else. So, about 3 or 4 chapters at the end were added due to suggestions from editors that I had. But yeah, it definitely takes a while. And to tie up loose ends, you don't want to leave any loose ends in the story or unfinished storylines. So you have to make sure that, everything it makes sense and you're capturing, what you want to. I also, I think I made one of my characters, Will, too mean. And I had an editor say to me, bad people aren't bad all the time and good people aren't good all the time. And so how can we make Will a little likable? So most people don't like Will even after I've written in, kind of his humanity. But I actually really cared about him by the end of writing it. And I think he has a special transformational story that I hope people see.
So I want to touch on that a little bit because I started reading it. And as we were saying before, it's not an easy book. It touches on a lot of things that can be very personal and that many people have experiences with through one way or another in their life. Was there a character that you caught on to or that you was easy to write or was hard to write or, to kind of flesh out, their life in the book?
Yeah, it's difficult because it's definitely an imaginary story I made up. So, but I found the story kind of brewing within me for a very long time. When I was in high school in California, I had a 4-year period of like a lot of loss and trauma. So my parents split up. My dad was diagnosed with cancer. He died in high school, when I was in high school. Yeah. So I had a lot of trauma and loss that I had to deal with at the same time figuring out who I was as a teenager. And so that's kind of where the story sparked from, was from my own sense of loss as a young person, and kind of how losses and mourning and grief can kind of, it kind of distorts how you process information and the choices that you make. And so the story is hard. One of the characters, Daniel, lives at a sober house. He and his brother are definitely dealing with alcoholism, as well as one of the sisters named Carrie. And, it just kind of tells a backstory as to why they've made such unhealthy choices. And it's from these traumas and kind of mourning the loss of some difficult things that have happened in their life that leads them to that. And I think that's real. So it's definitely not a book that you'll put down and you can forget about. It's usually a book that people have commented that they think about for, quite a few days afterwards.
It lingers.
It definitely lingers.
I find myself picking up on little bits, just the small parts that I've read so far. Yeah. It's like it stays with you after you walk away from it. Yeah. There's writing in there about loneliness but also connections, good and bad, and how we handle that. So looking at in the midst of what we've gone through the epidemic and a loss of humans being connected to one another, and how important that is. How can we take from the book and apply it to our lives, the lessons?
Sure. In the book, all of my characters struggle with loneliness. The first sentence of the book starts with Rose describing her loneliness. Mm-hmm. And so, Rose has loneliness, not connecting with her family in ways that she wants to, and that kind of seeps into her everyday life. Carrie is lonely because she's dealing with really horrific trauma by herself. Then you have Daniel and Will, who are dealing with, emotional trauma and kind of physical abandonment by their parents, and that's very difficult. But I think at the heart of it is everyone wants to be seen and heard and known, and loved and cared for despite our differences. That we can have differences and still feel cared about and known. And I think people are just looking not for transactional relationships, but more transformational relationships where you can, where you both have mutual respect, caring, love, humor, just want the best for each other. And I think that in life at the moment, I notice lots of transactional relationships, but we all want transformational ones that where you can be yourself, authentic self, and that people aren't going to go anywhere just because maybe you're a little different, or just being yourself.
And what I like with what I've read so far in the book is the relationship that Daniel's developing with the owner of the business that he works for. And you can just see him so lightened by that when he's dealing with so many heavy things in his life. Absolutely. And just how you wrote that was just so beautiful. Was that something that was inspired you from something else?
Absolutely. We all need people to come alongside us when we're having a difficult time. And that was really important for me to write characters in there. Mr. Bailey at the nursery, and then we have Dottie at my reimagined BJ's, the big box store. And they come alongside these young people as they're really struggling. And I think I wrote that because it's maybe what I wanted when I was growing up. you know, with all the devastation and loss in high school, I didn't really have a lot of people to walk with me on that kind of painful journey. And you know, everyone deserves someone to come alongside them, family or not, that kind of just helps them out and kind of takes their hand and walks with them through difficult stuff. So,
what is it in your life as the spiritual advisor, as the writer, and then all the work you do that brings you the most joy?
There's a common theme of I don't want people to think that they're alone in life. And that's kind of what brings my story all together. You know, as an end-of-life doula, you know, I'm journeying with people at the end of life. As a spiritual director, I'm journeying with people on their own faith journey. And as a writer, you know, C.S. Lewis said, we write to know we're not alone, or we read to know we're not alone. And I love that. You know, I think that I write to let people know that even though they've been through difficult things or happy things, that there are people that can share in that experience with you. So that's what I care most about, is letting people know they're not alone.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great to talk with you and to get to know you a little bit more. And we'll direct people to, you know, to your website.
Oh, great. Yeah, here's a little bit to the book. But I just want to say thank you for having me, and it's just been a pleasure to be with you today.
Oh, thank you again.
Thank you.
To see more of Juliette's work, visit theroseandpoppy.com.
If you enjoyed this video by The Local Scene, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching.